Hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday, first Friday of the year. So let me walk you through what the plan is for today. First off, if you haven't already, watch the Lou Gehrig video that's right above this video. Um, it's going to introduce the speech he gave at Yankee Stadium after he was diagnosed with ALS, which is a really, truly terrible disease. Lou Gehrig was basically the ultimate nice guy, fantastic baseball player. There's just a quick 4-minute video. It's going to give you a lot of context. It's going to help you really understand the speech. Really, really simple, really great video. So one thing is, only a small portion of the speech he gave that day was actually taped, but we're going to be looking at his full speech. And actually, the full speech itself, again, Gehrig's not a man that likes the spotlight, so it's really short. It's less than 300 words, but it's very effective. People still talk about it today as one of the great speeches, impromptu. So again, watch the video if you haven't already. You can click on that. It'll play in the window, or you can go to YouTube to watch it. But let's assume that you've already watched the video. So let's start breaking down his speech. So if you're on the website, if you click on Lou Gehrig's farewell speech right here, it's going to open up a copy of the speech. Well, it's going to ask if you want to make a copy. So of course, make a copy because you'll want to annotate this and note. This year, there's going to be a lot of annotation as we try to develop into really analytical and critical readers. So there's going to be a lot of annotation. There's going to be a lot of note taking, which you will be responsible to show. So that's why everything's going to be done in Google Docs because it works with different platforms. But I'll show you what we'll go through, and we'll annotate this together, do a sample annotation. So this is his farewell speech. Just take a minute, read through that. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but we'll talk about it bit by bit. So go ahead and read through it. Take some time, make some notes, and then I'll go back and kind of show you the process that we're going to be doing. But there are some slides to go with this as well. So I'm going to open up the slides for today. Go backwards here. So what we're looking at today is the key elements of rhetoric. So rhetoric sometimes can have a negative connotation. People think when they hear the term rhetoric, a lot of times it's meant as a way of manipulation. But really all rhetoric is just the different tools and devices we use to persuade people. Not necessarily positive or negative. It's just how do we persuade? So we'll be looking at Gehrig's speech just because it's simple, but it's very powerful. We're going to understand what makes it effective. So again, watch that video. Think about the situation. So it's July 4th, 1939. The Yankees want to honor Lou Gehrig, one of the greatest baseball players in the history of the franchise, after he gets diagnosed with this disease, ALS. Gehrig does not like the spotlight. He actually asks if he doesn't want to speak that day. So he's like, that's fine if you guys want to do this. I don't want to say anything. So they actually did this between games of a doubleheader. So everybody speaks. They say, okay, Lou's not going to speak today. But the crowd just starts going crazy. They say, we want Lou over and over again. So he agrees to speak. His speech is under 300 words, but it's very brief. It's to the point, and it's a heartfelt speech. So as you read through the speech and annotate it, ask yourself, what's the tone of the speech? What type of language or diction? Again, diction is just specific word choices. Authors and speakers, they choose their words based on the message, their audience, what kind of tone they want to get across. So tone and diction kind of relate to one another. So just look for specific words that jump out that give you some kind of indication of really what the purpose and the tone of the speech are. And again, we're leading straight into the purpose. What's the purpose of the speech? Finally, can you identify the thesis of his speech? Usually the thesis is going to be in the first paragraph. This one's going to be pretty easy to do. I'm going to move this window out of the way. One thing, luckily, if you're online and you're opening this with Google Docs, if you don't recognize a name or a reference, just do a quick Google search on that person. That's going to give you more information. It's going to help you understand the speech so much more. But I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so before we get to this, let's look at some key aspects of the speech here, and I'm going to do some sample annotations for you. So it starts off, fans. For the past 2 weeks, you have been reading about the bad break I got. So first off, just think about what he's saying there. He's been diagnosed with ALS. ALS is a horrible disease that basically entombs you in your own body. It starts at the extremities and then basically it works its way up your body, but it causes paralysis. So all you're slowly wasting away and all your muscles are just, you don't have control over them anymore. Eventually it leads to where you can't talk, where you can't swallow, and then finally you can't breathe. There's no known cure. Actually, today, ALS is referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease. So this is a terrible disease, yet he calls it a bad break. So when you hear the term bad break, do you think, oh no, like I'm so, feel sorry for me, like this is the worst thing ever? No, when you think bad break, so let's highlight this, bad break. And whenever you're highlighting something, basically I just want you to create a comment for it. So let's create a comment right here. So the bad break equals the ALS. And when he says bad break, it makes us think he's not really dwelling on this. He's not, this is something that's all consuming. It's just, it is what it is. So however you want to put that in your own words in your annotation, makes us think he isn't, we'll put he isn't dwelling on it. And if you've already read through the speech, which you should have by now, you'll realize that that's the only time he even bothers to mention the ALS. It's right there in that first sentence. All right. Yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of this earth. I've been in ballparks for 17 years and never received anything but kindness and encouragement from you fans. So right here, we can identify a thesis. So what's the point of this speech? What's the main idea? It's going to be right here. Yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. So let's create a comment there. The other way you can do that is by right-clicking and click comment. And let's call this his thesis statement. Okay. He says, I've been in ballparks for 17 years and never received anything but kindness and encouragement. So what type of tone are you starting to see here? Just think about that for a second. Again, when he talks about a bad break, again, he's not dwelling on it. He doesn't seem like, woe is me. You see words like kindness. Well, let's put kindness and encouragement together. Tone and diction. So let's just kind of set that aside. We're going to write, that kind of leads us to our tone and diction. We're going to add more to that note later as we kind of go through and see what kind of tone we think is being developed here. Look at these grand men. Which of you wouldn't consider it the highlight of his career just to associate with them for even one day? So again, what words are standing out here? He calls them grand men. Let's highlight that. Highlight of his career. So by now, you should start seeing a theme or basically a tone. What is his thoughts on the subject? So when we talk about tone and mood, sometimes people get those confused. So a tone is going to be the author's feelings on the subject. When we say mood, a word to substitute there could be atmosphere. And that's basically how the author wants you as the reader to feel. When we talk about tone again, it's how does the author feel about the subject? And I think he's calling these grand men highlight of his career. Sure, I'm lucky. So again, he's restating the thesis here. He's lucky. Who wouldn't consider it an honor to have known Jacob Rupert, builder of baseball's greatest empire, Ed Barrow, to spend 6 years with that wonderful little fellow, Miller Huggins, than to have spent the next 9 years with that outstanding leader, that smart student of psychology, the best manager in baseball today, Joe McCarthy. So this is the 1920s. These are not famous baseball players for the most part that we would know of today. So this is why I tell you, if you're not sure of a reference, just go ahead and Google it really quick. The great thing about Google Docs is we can just highlight Jacob Rupert, for instance, right click on that. And if you do explore Jacob Rupert on the side here, it's actually going to have a little web listing. So we're thinking this is Jacob Rupert, has to do with baseball. And here we have a link to Jacob Rupert, Baseball Hall of Fame. So we can click on that real quick. Oh, he was an executive for the New York Yankees. Okay. And then a little bio on him. So you feel free to read through that if you want. Let's look at Miller Huggins. Same thing. Highlight it, right click, explore Miller Huggins. There we can see a baseball player right there. Again, another person that's in the Hall of Fame. Now, we can kind of get it from context who this person is from Gehrig's speech, but again, we have the internet at our disposal, so let's use it. So he was a manager for the New York Yankees about the same time. So this would have been Gehrig's early career. So he was one of his original managers. All right. So again, just kind of use that. But any names or references you don't get, make a comment on that. So Baseball Hall of Fame, managed the Yankees. And all this is doing is this is helping us become more critical readers. It's helping us understand this piece. We could have just blown through those names and thought, oh, I guess those were just some guys that he knows. But when we actually take the time to look it up to become more critical readers, then we have a greater context of his speech. So who is he calling attention to on this, the day that's celebrating him? Is he bothering to call attention to himself? No. He's calling attention to all these people that he's worked with, that he's played aside. So that kind of gives you some more insight into Lou as a person as well. Again, he's not taking the time to say, oh, this has been the greatest career. I've done so many great things. He's saying how lucky I am to have been able to play alongside this person or play for this guy or have him as the executive. So just think about that. All that comes into play when we're reading this text. When the New York Giants, a team you would give your right arm to beat and vice versa, sends you a gift, that's something. So right there, that's something. What do you think about the phrasing? Does it sound like something you'd see in an academic paper, or is that just some guy talking? So this makes him seem down to earth. He's a common man. But he's a superstar baseball player. But at the same time, he's just talking to him like he's just sitting across from him. Boy, that's something. The New York Giants, team that he's probably hated throughout his entire career, do anything to beat him, and they're honoring him with a gift. That's something. Down to earth. And then he talks about groundskeepers and boys in white coats remembering him with trophies. Uses that something again. So we have repetition. Whenever repetition calls attention to something. So we'll say call, again, he's trying to identify with them as a common man. The repetition is he's just kind of listing off his examples. Whenever we see repetition, it kind of draws our mind back to the subject and what he's talking about. When you have a wonderful mother-in-law who takes sides with you in squabbles or fights with their own daughter, that's something. Again, repetition. When you have a father and a mother who work all their lives so you can have an education to build your body, it's a blessing. Again, blessing, very specific word. Comes back to the idea that Gehrig is lucky. All these ideas are tying back to his thesis statement. I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And a good thesis statement, all your evidence in the body of the paper needs to point back to that. So everything that he's saying, hey, I got to play with these great players. I got to be coached by these great men. I had wonderful family. All this ties back to his thesis that he's the luckiest man on the face of the earth. When you have a wife who's been a tower of strength, again, strong choice. Let's highlight that. More courage than you dreamed existed. Also important. That's the finest I know. So again, he's using all these terms to kind of paint this image of his wife specifically here in the last sentence of this paragraph, how she's been so supportive. She's been a tower of strength. She has courage. That's the finest I know. Again, he's pushing attention away from himself and onto the people that are around him and his family. So I close in saying that I may have had a tough break. Again, tough break. Not dwelling. So he's not dwelling on the bad. What's he talking about? He's talking about all the good things that have happened in his life. He still says, but I have an awful lot to live for. So this is actually, if you look at it, it's almost an argumentative type speech, just because he talks about his main point. I'm the luckiest man. Here's why I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And he even addresses a counter argument about the bad break, but he's not going to dwell on it. So we have this really simple speech. Again, my annotations may look different than yours, but it's all about just becoming more critical readers and pointing to things that are going to give us a greater understanding of the piece or of the person, anything, speaker, occasion, any of that. So yours may look different than mine, or if you're just following along today to learn more, they could look the same as well. So let's go back to our slides here. So we've read through, we've highlighted, we've annotated, we have a pretty good feel of the piece. So let's look at, why is the speech effective? Number one, this speech, like all rhetoric, has context. When we talk about context, it refers to the occasion or the time and place something was written or spoken. So we know it's delivered between games of a doubleheader, but more importantly, we know this is at a time when they are celebrating his life after he's just received a life-threatening diagnosis. So that's kind of the context of the speech. That's the situation, some might refer to it as. Number two, the speech, like all rhetoric, has a purpose. He has a clear purpose, and that's to refer to the goal that the speaker or writer wants to achieve. So his purpose is to remain positive by looking on the bright side and downplaying the bleak outlook. Would you say he's successful at that? Yeah, if you look at it, he makes only a single reference to the diagnosis. Calls it a bad break in the beginning, and in the end, he calls it a tough break. So he's not coming back to the idea that he's sick. It's a very, very small portion of his overall thoughts. There's no blame, no self-pity, no plea for sympathy. That's not what this speech is about. This speech is about celebrating the good things that he had in life. He maintains his focus throughout. Let's celebrate today and then get back to the work of playing baseball in this instance. The speech has a clear main idea. Again, a strong thesis is going to have an assertion or a point. So his point is he's the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Now, when you're looking at writing or you yourself are writing, you want to make sure that everything in the body of the paper or the speech or anything, it needs to tie back to your assertion or your thesis. So his thesis is he's the luckiest man on the face of the earth. All the sport examples, and I just included a few. We've already read through them, so I'm not going to read them again. But you see, all this ties back to the idea that he is the luckiest man on the face of the earth. So it's really concise, but he's backing up his claims. He's giving evidence. And finally, number 4, Gehrig presents himself as a common man. He knows his audience. He understands that the speaker, the audience, and the subject, they're all interrelated, and they're working back and forth. He needs to understand his audience. The audience needs to understand his subject. And this is really the basis of the rhetorical triangle, which we'll talk about more next week. So the analysis. Gehrig's understanding of how these factors, main idea, speaker, and audience, interact determines his speech. He's plain spoken. He has a positive appreciation for what he has had, and he has a champion's courageous acceptance of the challenges that lie before him. So overall, it's there's no fancy language, nothing, no real high concept terms, anything like that. It's just a guy that lived a good life that had a bad break. So I think this really stands the test of time because we just see we see how he's able to get his point across in such a simple way. And he's very true to himself. He's not trying to be something he's not. He didn't like the spotlight, so he didn't say a lot of words. He didn't bust out this super eloquent speech, but he just flat out said, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And you might have heard that come up in movies before and not knew the reference, but here's where that's from. Um, and he just he understands the purpose, defines it, and then backs it up with claims. So overall, it's a very effective speech. All right, so I hope this has given you a good basis on rhetoric. Again, we're going to get a lot more in depth as we look at more pieces, and we'll examine that rhetorical triangle some more. But hopefully you've had a chance to get a little bit better understanding if you weren't sure before, or what the expectations are as far as how you should be taking notes or how you should be annotating. Again, those are expectations for this course, so make sure you are staying on top of it. Head on over to Google Classroom to check out the assignment for today, and have a great rest of the day.